Good evening, vinyl community. Happy day after Veterans Day. Hope you had a great weekend. I have been talking about doing this video for a while. I wanted to do a piece about sidemen. And I'm gonna go through some famous sidemen first. And then what I thought I would do is I picked a bunch of albums from my collection, and I'm gonna pick a sideman and then do a montage of that sideman from that album and what he played on the next album and the next album and the next album. But I want to start with some famous ones, and I might do a follow-up on this because I can think of some famous other ones, very prominent guitarists, a couple of prominent guitarists I can think of from English rock bands who were famous sidemen. Of course, you could say the Traveling Wilburys was a bunch of sidemen. George Harrison, Roy Orbison, Petty, Dylan, and Jeff Lynne, but they were really headliners in a supergroup. Let me talk about a couple of famous sidemen bands. All right, this is a band called Traffic. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of them. Low Spark of High Heel Boys and John Barleycorn, Dear Mr. Fantasy. This was an album that came out after Low Spark in 72, and this is actually 73, and this is an album called Shoot at the Fantasy Factory. On the back here, you see the members of Traffic, Capaldi, Steve Winwood, and Chris Wood, the woodwind player. But there's a couple of backing people, David Hood and Roger Hawkins. David Hood and Roger Hawkins played down in Muscle Shoals. And it also says special thanks to Jimmy Johnson and Barry Beckett, who were also Muscle Shoals session guys. So they brought in session guys along with the great Rebop Kwaku Ba, who was with them on the Welcome to the Canteen album in 71. Great album, Shoot at the Fantasy Factory. So that's the Muscle Shoals guys. Next, JT, James Taylor. His Mudslide Slim was his third album. Yeah, James Taylor. You had Sweet Baby James in 1971. And you have a band that I actually saw him with at Carnegie Hall. I think I've mentioned that before. David Crosby, Graham Nash, and Carole King showed up for the encores. So Love Has Brought Me Round, You've Got a Friend. Throughout this album, he's backed by The Section, the band called The Section. Okay, Leland Sklar on bass, who has his own YouTube channel, very good YouTube channel. Leland has Danny Cooch on guitar, Russ Kunkel on drums, Craig Dirge on the keys, although I don't see him. Where is Dirge? Is he on the second side? Interesting. Craig was not on this, but if you look at the Running on Empty, which I don't have on vinyl, but I have on CD, Craig played the organ on that, played the keys. I guess he used his keys. He used Carole King was playing piano a lot on this album as a side person. So there's a good example. So that's The Section. I missed. Okay. I keep thinking of people I have association, so I'll go say what was going through my mind. I didn't pull this one, but Waddy Wachtel was with a band of musicians that he used a lot with a lot of the LA session guys. And Waddy Wachtel came up with Warren Zevon. He's on the Warren Zevon, so we'll do a thing on Waddy Wachtel. So this is Quadrophenia by The Who, the album, the soundtrack album from the movie. So there were a lot of covers on here on sides 3 and 4, and side 4 has a song called Green Onions, and the band was Booker T and the MGs. Now we'll talk about them. Donald Duck Dunn and Steve Cropper, the guitar player and the bass player they're going to be in my other thing. So Booker T and the MGs, remember that. The Funk Brothers, this is an old Temptations album called With a Lot of Soul. It had I Know I'm Losing You, which was covered by The Faces with Rod Stewart, who we're also going to get to. See, we're already making connections here, but this was the Funk Brothers. They had a lot of different. James Jamerson on bass was one of the most famous of the Funk Brothers. There's a great piece called Standing in the Shadows about the Funk Brothers, with Joan Osborne's in. They were the backing band of a lot of the Motown, all the Motown people, everybody you can think of. Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye, all of that. And then I wanted to mention now this band Stuff, okay, was more in the jazz element, but they played on a lot of rock band albums. You'll find them. Cornell Dupree, Eric Gale, Steve Gadd, of course, played with everybody from Toto to Steely Dan. And there's just a lot of people in Stuff. Richard T. On keys. You see these guys often, and they played a whole season with Saturday Night Live in the second season. Really, really great stuff. From the jazz element, I'm talking about rock, but you can see how rock, soul, you'll see country, English, blues, all interface. All right, so now I gave you the overview of those big bands, and then there was the Waddy Wachtel band. People like Linda Ronstadt had her own, sidemen, Andrew Gold, Dan Dugmore. It was kind of Linda Ronstadt's band. After she had the Eagles were her first backing band, and then they became the Eagles. All right, I started with the Van Morrison album. I know I picked this Into the Music, 1979, and I was looking at the musicians, and I said, let me just pick one of the side guys, because Van worked with great people. Wonderful album, Into the Music, Bright Side of the Road, Troubadours, Full Force Scale, Angelou, The Healing Has Begun. This is a really magnificent album, beautiful. And I picked Zakir Hussain. I could have picked Ry Cooder, plays slide guitar on Full Force Scale, but Zakir Hussain plays tablas on Bright Side of the Road, and Stepping Out Queen, two of the big singles from this album. So Zakir is well known because he's played with everybody, from John McLaughlin to, I believe he played with the Grateful Dead. I think he played with Harrison. But I have him here with, where's my Zakir? Here he is. Got these out of order, sorry. This was an album Mickey Hart put out called Diga. One of my guys, Tony L. Pizarros. Big shout out to Tony. I'm going to put you in the, he had talked about this album. This is my original version of it. Great album. Jerry's on it. But I picked it because Zakir Hussain, you can see all the percussionists on the back for you drummers. This is a drumming paradise of an album. Really cool. So Zakir Hussain is on this, and then I had to pick somebody else who was on here, and I saw guitar and special thanks Jerry Garcia, guitar, and Rizzoli Happiness, Jim McPherson, Kathy McDonald, and David Freiberg, vocals on Rizzoli. So David Freiberg, famous guy, was in Quicksilver Messenger Service, but I didn't want to pick him, David Freiberg, from a Quicksilver Messenger Service album, which I had Happy Trails, but got lost in the sauce, as it sometimes does. This is Paul Kantner's first album that he put out in 1970, Blows Against the Empire. It was really the first Jefferson Starship album as well. Paul Kantner, Jefferson Starship, and who is on here but David Freiberg, right? He is here, right? David Freiberg, courtesy of Capitol. So there's a lot of other people: Grace Slick, Jerry Garcia, Bill Kreutzmann, Mickey Hart, a lot of Jack Cassidy, David Crosby, Graham Nash. And I picked somebody from this album, and this is a great inside, Blows Against the Empire, Paul Kantner's hair there, looking like a weed plant, and then you got the kind of science fiction. This album actually, I think I've mentioned this before, won a Hugo Award, which was the science fiction award. You have this very Russian type of cover on the cover, and kind of very psychedelic on the back. So we picked on this album, Blows Against the Empire, we picked Harvey Brooks. Harvey Brooks went by a couple of names. Harvey Brooks went Harvey Goldstein Brooks. Bob Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited. Fantastic album, a lot of people know, with Like a Rolling Stone, one of probably Bob's biggest hit, if not, produced by Tom Wilson, 65. So here's Al Kooper also on here, playing organ and piano. Al Kooper, as many people know, played a lot of sidemen. Great book of his that I read, Backstage Passes and Backstabbing Bastards. I mentioned that before. Highway 61, Mike Bloomfield, but we went with Harvey Goldstein on bass. I mentioned Charlie McCoy on guitar, who played with Dylan quite a bit, and Al Kooper. Al Kooper played the organ in Like a Rolling Stone. So here we go to Super Session. Super Session has Mike Bloomfield, Al Kooper, and Stephen Stills. So Harvey Brooks again played bass. Interesting. He carried over along with Kooper. Mike Bloomfield, Eddie Ho on drums, Barry Goldberg on electric piano. So this had Steve Stills. He's been a session guy. He was a session guy with this, with Bloomfield. If you haven't heard this album, it's fantastic. It's very jammy. There's a picture of the guys in the studio. And it has Stills on one side and doing guitar, and Bloomfield on the other with Kooper and the rhythm section backing him up. Magnificent. So I went to this Stills album. Now Stills was not a sideman on this. I should have picked something with a sideman, but he's got such great sidemen. Some of his sidemen on this album are Jimi Hendrix. This is his first album, Stephen Stills, and Eric Clapton. So I'm kind of making a point there that sometimes sidemen are bold names and sometimes they're not so bold names. I mean, the side people, John Sebastian's on here, David Crosby, Graham Nash, Calvin Fuzzy Samuels, who played bass with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Rita Coolidge, who we're going to talk about, many others. There's Jimi Hendrix, engineer Andy Johns, voices, Cass Elliot, David Crosby, John Barbata on drums, who played with Starship later, after the first album. So you get the idea. And look, here this is how I love playing this game. I didn't even notice this. So here's a song called Cherokee on side 2. Really soulful song he does. And who plays the organ? Booker T. Jones. We just talked about Booker T and the MGs being side guys. So you get the idea. Lowell George was a famous side guy. Started his side work with Frank Zappa and the Mothers on Weasels That Rip the Flesh. Okay, where was I? Rita Coolidge, right? Rita Coolidge was on here. Rita Coolidge, who people know was one of Leon Russell's, one of my favorite sidemen and songwriters, was one of his muses, and did a lot of backup work. Did the most famously with the Joe Cocker, Mad Dogs and Englishmen. So Rita's on here. Where is she? She also did albums with Highwaymen, Chris Christopherson. I had that one. I let that one get away. Full Moon. So I'll copy it. Rita Coolidge on Go Back Home. Priscilla Jones, Claudia Lanier, John Sebastian, Cass Elliot, and David Crosby. So that's drums, Dallas Taylor, who played drums, and Johnny Barbata, and Dallas Taylor was a drummer for Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. And that's Go Back Home is the cut with Clapton. Stephen Stills, Eric Clapton, Calvin Fuzzy Samuels on bass, John Barbata, those backup voices, and Dallas Taylor. She's also on Sit Yourself Down, which was kind of a single off of this. So you get the idea. Okay, Stephen Stills from 70, the solo album. Now we move Rita Coolidge. Second Joe Cocker album, Joe Cocker. Who do we have here? We have Rita Coolidge, Bonnie Bramlett, the lovely Mary Clayton, whose brother was Sam Clayton from Little Feat. I just mentioned Lowell George being a side guy. And what did Mary Clayton sing on the Rolling Stones? Gimme Shelter. All right, so here I picked Bonnie Bramlett of the famous Delaney and Bonnie. There's a lot of great side guys. Chris Stanton, who now plays in Clapton's band, the Grease Band, Alan Spencer, Bruce Rollins, Henry McCullough, Leon Russell's on this that we mentioned previously, being a great side guy. Sneaky Pete on guitar, Sneaky Pete Kleinow, who played with the Burrito Brothers. Clarence White, who played with the Byrds. Paul Humphreys on drums, who played with lots of people. And there's Bonnie Bramlett. So we're moving, and Glenn Johns again. We've heard him before. He also did a couple of the Eagles albums, Glenn Johns. We could do a whole thing on producers. So we're just doing sidemen. Bonnie Bramlett. I mean, I have some Delaney and Bonnie. I'm trying to pick stuff that aren't lead guys. I did have Stephen Stills there. He kind of headlined both those albums because Stills was pretty big. I'll find a cut where Stephen Stills is a side person. I'll tell you what he's on, but I don't have it on vinyl. He played on as a sideman Electric Ladyland with Jimi Hendrix. This is, I think, a neglected album by the Allman Brothers. Enlightened Rogues came out in 79, I was going to say 81, and it has a great cut on it called Crazy Love. Crazy Love, right? Crazy Love, and Crazy Love has Bonnie Bramlett sing background vocals on Crazy Love. It was Greg, Dickie, J-Mo, Butch, and Dangerous Dan Toller on the second guitar, and David Rook Goldflies on bass. Really good Allman Brothers. It was a comeback album after Win, Lose, or Draw. They were going through a lot of stuff at the time, as the Allmans were always going through stuff, but I think it's a really neat album. So there's a guy who plays percussion on here, on Pegasus One More Time, and Blind Love, Joe Layla. I call him Layla, L-A-L-A. Lala? Joe Lala, probably. Speaking of Layla, this album's produced by Tom Dowd, who produced Layla, so maybe that's... And recorded at Criteria Studio, Miami, Florida, where Layla was recorded with, of course, Duane Allman, Allman Brothers, Eric Clapton, we just mentioned. So you see the overlap, how the tight circles that these guys run in. We always say, like, where we live, our town is very interconnected, and the entertainment business is very interconnected. The restaurant business is very interconnected. The mental health business is very interconnected. You know, people have contacts, and it's a smaller circle of people, like the vinyl community. You know, it's a lot of great people. Chad Kassem and Mazzy and Mike at the In Groove, and Michael 45 over in Germany, and Steve Westman up in Canada, and like terrific people that I've watched and I've learned so much from. My man down at in Dallas, so at North Texas Vinyl. All right, so that's Joe Lala, and Joe Lala shows up on Rod Stewart's Night on the Town. This was, I want to say, which I think is also a neglected album from Rod Stewart. It was before he did, you know, the Blondes Have More Fun stuff, but it was after the Faces and the, you know, Maggie May and Never Dull Moment, which is great stuff. I love that period. I love, this was 76, kind of in the middle, and just here's, surprise, bass, Donald Duck Dunn from Booker T and the MGs, Steve Cropper on guitars, Joe Walsh on guitars from the Eagles, David Lindley, who played with Jackson Browne, a lot of Fred Tackett, who was with Little Feat. So you see the people connected with these bands, Barry Beckett on keyboards from the Muscle Shoals band. You see how Roger Hawkins, again from also from the Muscle Shoals band. And Andy Newmark, another great drummer, and percussion, T-Vig and Jay Lala. So there you are. And I picked, who did I pick for this? I guess I picked Donald Duck Dunn, because that's the first one. This is a great album, Tonight's the Night, Killing of Georgie, First Cut is the Deepest. It's really good Rod Stewart album. Got the painting on the back. Rod the Mod, 76. All right, so moving right along, Donald Duck Dunn. The Blues Brothers, probably one of the most famous backing bands of all time. You had much of Booker T and the MGs minus Booker T. Besides Joliet, Jake, and Elwood, you had Paul Schaefer from the Letterman Band on the keys, organ. That's probably why they didn't have Booker T. But you had Steve the Colonel Cropper on guitar, Donald Duck Dunn on the bass, always smoking his pipe, and Steve Jordan on drums and the horns, Lou Blue Marini, etc., Bones Malone, and a man named Tom Triple Scale Scott. So Tom Scott, very famous tenor player. I was going to say alto, but tenor. And I miss Blue Lou Marini here too. I mean, they're just, you love the names, and they all have like nicknames. Joliet Jake and Paul the Shiv and Steve the Colonel, Matt Guitar Murphy, Donald Duck Dunn. So Tom Scott showed up on a famous album in the earlier 70s called Miles of Aisles. The first live Joni Mitchell album before Shadows and Light, which is great. Shadows and Light is fantastic with Jacko and Pat Metheny. But this was with the LA Express. And Joni really stepped out with a real legitimate jazz band. Tom Scott, famous session guy, Max Bennett on bass, Tom Scott on the reeds, woodwinds, John Guerin on drums, Robin Ford, fantastic jazz electric guitar player, Larry Nash on piano. So there's Tom Scott with Miles of Aisles. You've got Cactus Tree, you've got Jericho, Money or Nothing were the new songs on this, and Big Yellow Taxi, You Turn Me On, I'm a Radio, Carrie, Last Time I Saw Richard, People's Parties, KCU, Blue, Woodstock. Great live Joni album. I'm a big Joni fan, as you guys know. Tom Scott. We went from Tom Scott to Tom Scott, and I think I was going to do, Tom Scott is also on this album, because we went from, we did Tom Scott, we Donald Duck Dunn, Tom Scott is on here, Gaucho, this is going a little long, Steely Dan. Tom Scott's on quite a few of these songs, Babylon Sisters. He's on most of these songs, I think. Tom Scott's on Gaucho. He's on Glamour Profession, and amazing side people. I mean, this was 1980 Steely Dan. They were at the top of their game, coming off of Asia, of course. Tim, University of Vinyl, I missed him. Big Steely Dan fan, Steely Dan historian. I've learned a lot from him. So this had Tom Scott. It also had the Brecker brothers and Dave Sanborn, who were many, many sidemen. But it had guitars on My Rival, and I just noticed is Hiram Bullock and Rick Derringer. Actually had Steve Kahn as well. Rick Derringer. So I thought that was kind of fun. I'm almost finished with this. So you'll see where this goes. 1980 Steely Dan, Rick Derringer. Where was Rick Derringer? Rick Derringer was on Edgar Winter. And this was the big album for Edgar Winter. They only come out at night. 72. Wow. I would have said 74, but it was earlier. Frankenstein, Free Ride. So he had two big hits from this. And he had his band, Edgar Winter's band. And in the side, it's a special thanks to Rick Derringer for slide guitar, pedal steel, bass, background vocals, and claves. It's about everything you can think of. Edgar and the band, they only come out at night. So there's another guy on here, Randy Joe Hobbs. Randy Joe played bass on Free Ride, and we all had a real good time. And Randy Joe Hobbs, not really a big stretch, because you've got Edgar Winter to go to Johnny Winter and who's there? Randy Joe Hobbs playing bass. So he was the bass player really from Johnny's band. This is the great Johnny Winter, and it's got a fantastic version of Johnny Be Good, Jumpin' Jack Flash, Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, just fantastic. And produced by Johnny Winter and Rick Derringer. Rick was very tight with, and he was in this band as well. So Randy Joe and Rick both helped out brother Edgar. Johnny, of course, is passed. Edgar's still around, playing now with the All-Stars, Ringo Starr's All-Stars. We haven't gotten into the Beatles sidemen. I could do a whole segment on the Beatles sidemen. All right, this video has gone on very long. I had really fun talking about the sidemen. This was also recorded in Florida, Pirates World, Dania, Florida. It's cool, right? On Bill Graham's Fillmore East. Fantastic. This was Howard Stein's Capitol Theater. So before Peter Shapiro bought the Capitol Theater in Portchester, which is not far from me, Howard Stein managed it. And Johnny Winter, Rick Derringer, Randy Joe Hobbs, and Bobby Caldwell on percussion. So it's a great, great album. Rock and roll midlife. A whole lot of shaking going on. Check it out. Johnny in his prime. And that's it for Sidemen. We'll do another one. This went very long. Keep on rocking. Keep on spinning that vinyl community. And we'll see you too. I want to thank everybody for watching. And please like, subscribe, and comment if you see fit. And have a great week. I'm going to try to be a little bit more consistent. It's just easy to go in between these videos and hop back on here. And tell me if there's stuff that you'd like to see. I'm in the middle of cataloging all of my records. I think I'm up to about 450. I think I'm probably going to have 100, 150 more when all is said and done, and then I'm going to start with the CDs. So, and I'm still collecting, so I hope we all are. Keep on trucking. Talk to you soon. Be well. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.